Tibet has been occupied for 60 years. The Chinese Communist Party has waged a systematic campaign to wipe out Tibetan culture. Will there ever be a free Tibet? This is China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. It's been 60 years since the Chinese Communist Party first took over Tibet. Before that, Mao Zedong tried to wine and dine the Dalai Lama. You know, get him to see how good Buddhism with Chinese characteristics could be. Obviously, that did not work out. In 1959, the Dalai Lama fled Tibet. He would go on to establish a democratic Tibetan government in exile in Dharamsala, India. Meanwhile, the Chinese Communist Party would go on to destroy most of the Buddhist temples in Tibet while massacring 1.2 million Tibetans, according to some observers. International calls for free Tibet died down as Western businesses and officials eagerly sought out the Chinese market, which of course worked out so well for them. Karma is well, you get the idea. So, what is the future of Tibet? I sat down with Dorji Sentin, a member of parliament for the Tibetan government in exile and executive director of students for Free Tibet. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Chris.
So it's been 60 years since, the Communist Party says it liberated Tibet. How are things in Tibet?
So for us, for the Tibetan and for people around the world, Tibet, it's a 60 years of occupation and it's 60 years of resistance inside Tibet. And we need to understand that Tibet is colonized by China and it's under the military occupation right now. Despite the 60 years of occupation, Tibetan has continued to resist for their freedom. And we are seeing growing resistance inside Tibet, especially by the new generation in this difficult time.
Mm-hmm. Do you mean inside Tibet or abroad?
Yeah, inside Tibet, outside Tibet. Okay. So one example that I can give, one of the recent most landmark historic uprising in 2008 that has captured the imagination of the international community, and China was also shocked. It was led by the Tibetan new generation. Almost 70% of people who joined the uprising and that took part in hundreds of cities and villages around the whole Tibet was led by the new generation. So we can see the new generation Tibetans are taking the responsibility of the movement in the resistance.
I'm curious, why do you think the Chinese Communist Party is so interested in Tibet?
So Tibet is strategically very important for China to spread its control in Asia. And when Tibet was occupied, Tibetan movement, the leadership, we have been telling to the international community that China's aim is not just Tibet. It wants to control the Asia and the global community. So what we are seeing right now, China's expansion, this idea is not limited to Tibet. We are seeing in Asia threat in South Asia, East Asia. So Tibet is really, really strategic, important place for them. And Tibet has very, very rich mineral resources. And like any other colonized country, it is important for China to take away the resources. And they're doing the mining, they're driving the river. So on that part, China is gaining a lot. And for them, the continuation of Tibet and also the population they can transport into Tibet, which now we are concerned that Tibetans are becoming minority in our own land. So all those are the reasons that China continue to occupy Tibet.
The Chinese Communist Party has been pushing Tibetans to be less religious and spend their time learning Mandarin. Why is the Communist Party so concerned about changing the culture of Tibet?
So Tibetan language and Tibetan culture, Tibetan religion is the core of Tibetan national identity. And what China wants to do is to wipe out Tibet from the map of the world. And Tibetans inside Tibet to, forget their culture, their identity, so that they can control the Tibetan people. But Tibetans are continually resisting by using their culture as a means of resistance, which is really, really unique and new things that we are seeing in the resistance, how Tibetans are using culture and language as a tool to resist. And China, the synthesization program that is going on, not just in Tibet, but other part of the occupied territory, like in East Turkestan, basically they want to, want new generation to forget everything. And what we are seeing is new generations are taking up, courageously taking the risk to keep their identity and fighting back.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to ask about that. Do you see any parallels between what has happened in Tibet and what is happening with the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, or East Turkestan, as you call it?
Yeah, so the current situation inside East Turkestan is very, very difficult. Over 1 or 2 million Uyghurs are under the concentration camp, which is unbelievable. And the person who has implemented this policy, the current party secretary in East Turkestan, in the Uyghur Autonomous Region, the Cheng Guokong, he was the party secretary of so-called Tibet Autonomous Region. So when he became the party secretary of Tibet in 2011, he had implemented such policy, a new policy on security which undermined and which repressed the Tibetan religious freedom and right of the people. And under that policy, he implemented a grid system, urban grid system, and introducing biometric security. And then it has really impact a lot, caused a lot of challenges for the Tibetan people inside Tibet. So what we are seeing right now happening to the Uyghur people, the Tibetans has gone through that.
Because it was the same guy running the show.
Yes, he's the same guy who is doing that. And for Tibetans, despite such difficulty, we continue to resist, and we continue to find different ways of engaging and protecting our culture. So we have our solidarity with the Uyghur people, but we need to understand that this is not just one place happening. It's happening all over and it's a master kind of strategy that China is implementing to the Chinese people and to all the occupied territories.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know the Communist Party has gone so far as to even create laws regulating reincarnation. How likely do you think it is we're going to see a new Dalai Lama someday that's party approved?
So I think that's what China want to bring again in the discussion. But His Holiness Dalai Lama is the soul of the movement. Mm-hmm. And His Holiness Dalai Lama had made it very clear that the reincarnation will be chosen by the Tibetan people, and China has no business in it. And basically, it is funny that Chinese government, which repressed religion for over the last 60 years, and now finding interest in choosing next Dalai Lama. And not only that, this is not a new thing. They, I think, form a new law, a law in 1995, which under Order Number 5, they decide that Chinese government has the right to choose any reincarnation in Tibet, which we have protest, and now international community is also understanding that. Recently, there was a resolution in the Congress, U.S., also saying that it's a Tibetan people right, and China cannot decide on that. So on that part, those are the legal thing. But basically, it is most important. The reincarnation and the religion is so deeply related to the heart and belief. No matter what China do, if Tibetan doesn't believe, they cannot do. They can make rules. They can put people behind the bars, but they cannot force people to believe. So on that part, recently we observed the 30th birthday of His Holiness the Panchen Lama, the 11th Panchen Lama Gintichögyinima, and he has been missing for the last over 24 years, and China tried to do that, but the China appointed the so-called Panchen Lama. Nobody respect inside Tibet. Nobody respect outside. So I think it shows that it failed. If China wanted to do again, it won't work. But then, most important thing is His Holiness has devolved the political authority to the elected leader of the of democratic institution in exile, and I think that is really critical here.
Mm-hmm. So possibly there will be two Dalai Lamas, but the Tibetan community will know which one is the one they support.
So I think if China does that, it won't definitely make any sense to the Tibetan community. And what I'm saying is more important is the political struggle and movement of Tibet will continue. And His Holiness Dalai Lama, under his leadership, he has established a democratic institution in Exile, which represent both Tibetan people inside and outside. In early 60s, His Holiness first established the Tibetan Parliament in Exile. And now we have an elected Tibetan president of Tibetan government in exile. So I think those are key important that how movement will sustain, and it is the legacy of His Holiness, even though we still hope that His Holiness will return to Tibet in this lifetime, but His Holiness has shown the vision that how Tibet should be a democratic institution, and the exile government that based in India is really important in that whole picture.
And it's interesting that you say, that there is this democratic institution that's been created, because one of the pieces of propaganda the Communist Party uses is to say that the Dalai Lama was like a feudal, slave-owning oppressor of the Tibetan people. But clearly he has established a democratic institution.
So when even before the Chinese invasion, even when His Holiness was very young, he tried to introduce new, changes, and basically bringing changes in the Tibetan government and system. But at the same time, even before China's invasion, Tibetan people are free. Tibetan people have a government. Of course, His Holiness was the leader. Tibetan has a system where no matter what kind of system we have, but we have food to eat. There was no famine, the way after Chinese invasion, so many Tibetan faced a lot of challenges, and right now under occupation. And His Holiness always has this vision to have to have the people the power and to form the democratic institution. So that's why when His Holiness first escaped and then came to exile, the first thing he did was forming that democratic institution. So China, there is no basis on China's claim that His Holiness wanted to, go back and, and establish the same system. There's no point, there's no basis for that. And basically, for Tibetans, we want to have a system which decide our own future by the Tibetan people.
You mentioned the United States government, and one thing I find very encouraging is that when it comes to the Chinese Communist Party, this is one of the few things that is always bipartisan. It's something both Democrats and Republicans can agree on. What has been the support for Tibet and to Tibetans abroad?
So throughout the Tibetan freedom struggle, U.S. government and people, most importantly, has supported Tibet issue, and of course supported His Holiness Dalai Lama. And recently there was a bill passed in Congress called Reciprocal Access to Tibet, which actually seek reciprocity because China right now rules Tibet under complete lockdown. So they don't allow any people from outside freely. And even more difficult for the Tibetan Americans who have a right to go to Tibet. And also like the American journalists or leaders. And this act demand China to, have this reciprocity. And those people who implement such law, such restriction, will be also barred from United States to visit United States. And so it is supported unanimously as a bipartisan support in the Congress, and it is passed as a law last December. So which is a historic, support which will make China accountable. And then the Tibetan government and Tibetan exile government and Tibetan settlements in India for the education, for the school, for the community, United States government has been very supportive throughout the years. and Tibet, and especially the United States people, the American people has been like supportive for the Tibet movement, and so the organization I work right now, Students for Free Tibet, was established in United States 25 years ago. We have so many American members and supporters, along with Tibetan members. So we have a grassroots people support for this movement from this country and around the world.
I know a few years ago there was a big Free Tibet movement in Hollywood. You had actors like Richard Gere promoting it, but you don't see that much anymore. What happened?
So Richard Gere is still one of the most important supporter and friend of His Holiness Dalai Lama, and he continued to advocate the rights of Tibetan people. And what we are seeing right now, there is a strong influence from China. Any stars or Hollywood actors or filmmakers keep relation with Tibet or Tibetan leader like His Holiness Dalai Lama are barred from visiting China. So what we are seeing right now, the depression and the situation that Tibetan people face inside Tibet is no longer in Tibet. The influence, the censorship is now coming to the West as well. So because of that, of course, it is sometimes difficult for people to stand for issue of Tibet. But no matter that, there are many other key people who has shown their support despite the consequence they face from China. But of course, it is our responsibility now, especially for Tibetan and American, also to protect our rights here, how we fight back the censorship, because this is a land of free. This is not China, but how people still fearful because China may punish the companies, the corporation that try to make business with China, undermining the human rights issue, basic principle of what United States stand for. So I think this is also a fight that we as the Students of Free Tibet and also many other groups and people are engaged.
So what is the larger Tibetan community outside of Tibet doing?
So for the last 20 years, many Tibetans have, has moved to the West, and of course Tibetan from inside Tibet, as well as Tibetans in India. And what we have formed now, unlike in the past, Tibetan community has become and integrated into the global community. So like in the United States, in North America, we have around 18 to 20 Tibetan community centers. And Tibetan community try to pass on the culture and language and identity to our new generation. So through this community center, which directly operate independently, but also in relation with our exile government to protect our culture, language, so that new generation can take the movement forward. And the organization I work, Students for Free Tibet, as it was established 25 years ago, we, along with those campaign, the political campaign we do a lot of trainings to the new generation leaders. And last year we organized 12 trainings, engaging almost 500 participants, basically to train them as the new generation leaders and activists about campaigning, about media communication, about leadership, and also about the security, online security, how to be safe from the China's threat. Now we are no longer safe anywhere. So all those things, we are building the movement, both the community and the global Tibet movement, and we have over 180 Tibet groups around the world still campaigning for Tibet even after such a long time.
And you currently are an MP in the Tibetan Parliament, correct?
Yeah, I'm a member of Tibetan Parliament in Exile based in Dharamsala.
What is being an MP in a government in exile? What does that entail?
So, as we struggle for our freedom, His Holiness Dalai Lama has established the Tibetan exile government and Tibetan Parliament early 60s. as we fight for our freedom, we also want to create our own vision and system, what kind of system we want to create. So this democratic institution is really important. As I said now, the Tibetans are in almost 30 countries, but the institution we have, Tibetan Exile government, also known as Central Tibetan Administration, our president is being elected by people around the 30 countries. And our member of parliament also represent all those people, and especially Tibetan people inside Tibet. So every 5 years when we do election, when Tibetan people in exile, because Tibetan people inside Tibet cannot vote. So Tibetan people in exile represent the movement. By representing the movement, when we form our government, it is a direct challenge to Chinese government that what kind of system we want. We don't want an oppressive regime that China is right now implementing in Tibet. So that is, I think, key. And His Holiness Dalai Lama, he has voluntarily stepped down from the political responsibility in 2011. So since then, even the exile government role has become much more important, even though we hope that we will go to Tibet soon, but it might take time, because any resistance, any movement take time. So how we pass this knowledge and experience to new generation? So I, as a Tibetan born in India, I'm engaged in the movement because of that vision from our elder generation. And that's why the democratic institution in the exile community as Tibetan government in exile, also known as Central Tibetan Administration, is key. And what China claims about His Holiness and about Tibet is completely baseless. What we want, Tibetan people to be free. Tibetan people can decide their future. And that's why we have a very healthy democratic system in exile. And now, Tibetans across the globe, in almost 30, 40 countries, and especially recently we mark the Tibetan National Uprising Day, 60 years of Tibetan National Uprising Day. That was held in almost 100 cities around the world on same day by Tibetans and supporters. So you can see the strength of the movement, how it's being passed generation after generation. And I think that is key to the movement. No longer how much it takes, we will continue to resist until we gain our freedom.
This is something the young Tibetans care about.
That's completely true, both inside and outside.
So where do you see Tibet in the next 10 years?
So as I said, I think it is really critical time because of His Holiness' age and because of what is happening right now. As much as we Tibetan care for our freedom, it is now time for international community to care for their democracy. Because what we see, Xi Jinping, the expansionist kind of the approach has now crossed Tibet or East Turkestan. It has reached beyond Asia and also in the West. So our democracy, our open society, our freedom is under threat. So I think it is key for Tibetan. This 10 year is completely important, especially for new generation. Also Tibetan inside and outside, how we continue our movement. And for that, we need to invest in the movement to new generation. And for the global community, I can see now the governments or leaders and the community are awakening. We have been telling international community long back, you cannot trust China. But people thought by doing business, by opening up China, there might be a trickle-down democracy, Chinese might change, but now things has gone from bad to worse. The Human Rights Watch report said things have much more critical, has gone bad, since 1989. We are marking the 30 years of Tiananmen massacre, right? So I think it is time for Tibetans and also to the global community and people who care for freedom to really, really think and to stand for Tibet issue. And I think Tibet issue is a litmus test because for last over 60 years, under His Holiness Dalai Lama's leadership, we had practiced non-violence as a mean to resolve our issue. And if this movement fail, of course it will caution the method of non-violence. But as I said, not only from the religious point of view, but new generation leaders are in strategic way, smart and strategic way, see nonviolence movement as a impactful and practical. And we are doing that. But for that, we need global community support.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It was fantastic to have a chance to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Chris, for having me.